Franklin Brighton was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, the only child of one of the wealthiest families in the city. His father, Mr. Brighton, was a celebrated entrepreneur, known for his sharp mind and unrelenting work ethic. The Brighton family empire spanned industries, luxury cars, private jets, sprawling estates, and yachts anchored in exotic locations. Their wealth was so vast that it seemed untouchable, and Franklin grew up surrounded by a world of limitless possibilities. The Brighton mansion was the epitome of grandeur. Its marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the gardens stretched as far as the eye could see, adorned with rare flowers imported from around the globe. Mr. Brighton had always believed that wealth came with responsibility, and he often told Franklin, "This empire isn't just for show, it's a legacy. One day, you'll be its steward." But Franklin wasn't listening. Even as a child, he was indifferent to his father's lectures on hard work and discipline. While his parents emphasized values like humility and charity, Franklin's focus was on indulgence. He had everything handed to him: expensive toys, exclusive vacations, and the best education money could buy. Yet, he seemed to lack gratitude for it all. By the time Franklin was a teenager, his recklessness was apparent. He skipped school to attend parties, surrounded himself with sycophants, and squandered his generous allowance on frivolous pursuits. His friends, a group of equally entitled youth, fueled his bad habits. Together, they spent nights in clubs, buying drinks for strangers, and flaunting their privilege for attention. His parents grew increasingly alarmed. "Franklin, we didn't build all this so you could throw it away," Mr. Brighton scolded one evening after Franklin returned home drunk. "Throw it away?" Franklin said, his eyes glassy. "You have so much money you don't even know what to do with it. Let me enjoy it." Mrs. Brighton, always the gentler of the two, pleaded with her son. "Franklin, darling, this lifestyle will ruin you. You need to think about your future. What happens when we're no longer here to guide you?" Her words cut deep, but Franklin refused to show it. He brushed them off, retreating to his room to plan the next night's escapades. As Franklin grew older, his behavior only worsened. He dropped out of college, claiming he didn't need a degree to inherit his father's wealth. His days were spent lounging in luxury cars or hosting extravagant pool parties. At night, he frequented high-end clubs, gambling away thousands without a second thought. His parents were at their wits' end. They tried everything: cajoling, threatening, even withholding access to certain funds, but Franklin found ways around their restrictions. "Why can't you just let me live my life?" he snapped during one heated argument. "You had your chance to work and build this empire. Now it's my turn to enjoy it. But what will you do when we're gone?" Mrs. Brighton asked, her voice breaking. "How will you manage our wealth?" Franklin sneered. "You don't need to worry about that. I'll be just fine." One fateful day, Mr. and Mrs. Brighton boarded their private jet for a business trip abroad. Franklin barely noticed their absence, too busy planning another party. But later that evening, his phone rang, and the news shattered his world: the jet had crashed. There were no survivors. The days that followed were a blur. At the funeral, Franklin stood still by the graves, but his mind wasn't on his loss, it was on his newfound freedom. For the first time, there were no parents to chastise him, no rules to follow. He inherited everything: the mansion, the cars, the investments, and the vast fortune his parents had spent decades building. Instead of honoring their memory, Franklin saw it as an opportunity to live without restraint. Within weeks, the Brighton mansion became infamous for its wild parties. Loud music shook the walls, scantily clad women danced in every corner, and liquor flowed like water. Franklin's so-called friends reveled in his generosity, taking full advantage of his wealth. Neighbors gossiped about the debauchery, shaking their heads at the young man who seemed determined to destroy himself. "Do you hear that noise?" one elderly neighbor complained to another. "That boy is a disgrace to his parents' memory." Franklin didn't care. He felt invincible. But as the months passed, his lifestyle began to catch up with him. His gambling habits slipped out of control, and he started losing significant amounts of money. He sold off his father's prized collection of vintage cars to cover debts, followed by the family yacht. Still, he couldn't stop. One night, drunk and frustrated after a particularly heavy loss at the casino, Franklin returned to the mansion and lit a cigarette. He fell asleep on the couch, and the cigarette tumbled onto a curtain. Within minutes, the house was ablaze. Franklin barely escaped with his life, stumbling into the street as flames consumed everything. As he watched his parents' mansion collapse, he felt a pang of regret, but it was quickly overshadowed by panic. He had no insurance, no backup plan. Everything was gone. Homeless and penniless, Franklin turned to his friends for help. But the same people who had cheered at his parties now turned their backs on him. "You're nothing but bad luck," one of them said, slamming the door in his face. For the first time in his life, Franklin was truly alone. Franklin wandered the streets, sleeping under bridges and scavenging for food. He looked nothing like the carefree playboy he had once been. His clothes were torn, his face hollow and unshaven. People who once admired him now crossed the street to avoid him. One night, lying on a cold slab of concrete, Franklin stared at the stars and thought of his parents. He remembered his mother's tearful pleas and his father's stern warnings. He whispered into the darkness, "I've failed you both. I wasted everything you gave me." The next morning, Franklin resolved to change. He found work hauling bricks at a construction site. The labor was grueling, but he embraced it. He worked on farms, digging trenches under the hot sun, and later learned to fix cars as a roadside mechanic. Each day was a struggle, but Franklin found solace in the honesty of his labor. Over time, his diligence caught the attention of a local businessman who offered him a stable job at his factory. Franklin worked his way up, saving every penny and avoiding the temptations that had once consumed him. Years later, Franklin was no longer the reckless boy who had squandered his fortune. He had rebuilt his life from the ground up, earning respect and stability through hard work. Franklin eventually married a kind woman who shared his values, and together they built a loving family. He raised his children with the lessons he had learned the hard way, often gathering them around to share his story. "Life is beyond vanity," he would tell them. "I had everything and lost it because I didn't value it. Wealth is fleeting, but character lasts forever. Remember that." Franklin's tale became a beacon of hope for others, a story of redemption and the enduring power of humility and hard work. Though he had lost everything, he gained something far more valuable, a life of purpose and meaning. Here are 3 moral lessons from this story. 1. Wealth without discipline leads to ruin. No matter how much wealth one inherits, recklessness and poor decisions can quickly turn abundance into poverty. Managing resources wisely is essential for sustaining success. 2. Humility and hard work pave the path to redemption. Even after losing everything, Franklin's willingness to work diligently and accept help allowed him to rebuild his life and find true happiness. 3. True wealth lies in family and values, not material possessions. The story highlights that fulfillment comes not from riches but from meaningful relationships, personal growth, and the strength to overcome adversity. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the YouTube channel.